Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm so excited to have Greg Suchy with us today. Greg is a life coach, mentor, speaker, and co-host of the Addiction, Alcoholism, and Three Principles webinar and podcast series. Greg's main focus is helping people find real freedom from addictions of every kind. His sincere, gentle approach to finding our innate health has attracted coaching clients from all over the world. Welcome, Greg. I'm really grateful that you're with me today. I know you have a wonderful story to share and you do so much good work in the world. So I'm happy to have you share your experience, your journey to coming across the principles and how you work with the principles with your clients. So let's start off a little bit at the beginning and just tell me a little bit about your history, and then how you came across the principles would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me. It's definitely an honor to be here and to get to have this conversation with you. I love sharing about this. It's really made a huge impact on my life and a lot of the people that I've come across since then. So I found myself in 2012. I ended up in the rooms of AA and looking for answers to how to be happy in life. Really, at that point, I don't really care too much about quitting drinking or anything. I just wanted to quit being miserable. And I wasn't really finding it so much in the meetings. I mean, I would be fine during the meetings and for that hour before and the hour after when people are hanging out, but then I'd get home and I'd be right back where I was. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of, in this place of, like, what now? If this is the best thing out there and it's not really working for me, it's like, where do I go? And I was fortunate enough, about 5 months into sobriety, I ended up actually having a really profound spiritual experience at the end of a gratitude meeting that they hold every year on Thanksgiving Day. Mm-hmm. And it was, 200 people or so, just everybody got 30 seconds to say what they were grateful for, and it was just this beautiful energy in the room. And at the end of the meeting, when we all joined hands to say a prayer, I was no longer there in physical form at all. I'd accessed that energy behind life that Sid talked about, and Bill Wilson and all these great people throughout time who have had enlightenment experiences. And I saw the interconnectedness of everything and how we're all made of the same energy, just, kind of vibrating at different frequencies, and that's the same, whether it be, us or the chairs we're sitting on or the computers in front of us, it's all the same energy. It's just manifested in a different form.
Yeah.
And it for a while, it left me with this really great feeling of ease and comfort and peace. And that was the time when my desire to escape reality actually left me. Hmm. But as I tried to figure out what had happened, make sense of it, unfortunately, mostly what I was given in feedback was that people didn't know what happened to me, but it was probably dangerous and going to get me killed because I didn't have enough time sober and I hadn't even worked any of the steps yet. And, I mean, I had just gotten a sponsor at that time. I hadn't really started doing any of the work, and here I am having this experience.
Wow.
And so I spent about 3 years in AA, kind of half frustrated and half happy and half whatever, not really in any consistent space. And during that time, I ended up, somebody had introduced me to local Unity Church, which is more of a metaphysical view of the Bible, and they get into like physical healing and stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting to me. And I was looking at the church bulletin one Sunday, and it just said new meeting, three principles, and didn't explain what it was. So I had no intellectual reason to want to go, but I felt really called to show up. And I'm definitely glad I did, because I got to meet Bob and Marty, which just this amazing couple. And Bob especially was really on fire with this and with the three principles understanding. And he pulled me aside because like a good AA person, I showed up an hour early, which nobody was there, not until about 10 minutes before. But then he pulled me aside before people showed up, and he just downloaded all this information on me about the three principles and how they'll change my life, and, makes everything so much simpler. And I'm just looking at him like you're crazy. Where's the rest of it? This just seems way too simple. How's this going to change my life? But I felt like there was something there for me.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't really understand what it was, I felt like I needed to continue on this and look into it further. Right. And quite honestly, I spent about the first year trying to prove the three principles wrong. I was desperate to find some kind of situation where it didn't apply, where my thinking wasn't creating my feelings, and I wasn't creating my own version of reality. I couldn't find one. So I was kind of sold on the whole idea. And then I really got even more into Sid's teachings and kind of getting into the depth of the simplicity that he always spoke with. Mm-hmm. And that honestly was one of the most attractive things to me about it, aside from the results, but just the ease and simplicity and grace that Sid spoke with. Mm. And it really just captured me, and I just every time I would listen to him or read some of his stuff, it would just put me in this place of just peace and serenity. And
yeah, that's so beautiful. It's so funny. When you were sharing that, I'm just thinking back. I mean, I'm not too familiar with AA, but it's sort of surprising, because you mentioned that I think the originator of AA had an enlightening experience. And so for me, I'm thinking to myself, how strange that they would think that you need to go through AA to get to that place, when whoever originated it got to that place first, and then out of it grew AA. So how did they take to you coming across the principles? How did you find the marriage of being in AA and being into the principles?
I didn't.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, yeah, because at least here, I'm in Akron, Ohio, where AA got started. So it's a rather strict practice of AA principles here. I don't mean strict in a way of actually following the principles of AA, but strict in what they believe are the current principles of AA. Because if you actually look at Bill Wilson's teachings, he was really big on what he called healthy experimentation. He wanted people to try different ways of recovery and see what worked, and then share it. If it works, why not incorporate that?
Wow.
In fact, that's in one of his writings on the tradition regarding group autonomy, so that each AA group should run their group the way that they want to, even if they don't agree with or follow any of AA's principles. Mm-hmm. And he said the reason is one of two things is going to happen. Either they'll fail and they'll kind of end up adopting AA's principles anyway, or they'll succeed and AA should adopt their principles.
Wow. I love that. I love the
openness. It's right there in the core teachings of it, in the core philosophy of AA, but unfortunately it's kind of been lost in translation over the years as people focused more and more on the 12 steps, mm-hmm. which, by the way, is the only thing in the big book that's suggested. Everything else is considered to be, mandatory, but the steps are suggested as a program of recovery. Wow. The only things that were really considered to be vital were honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I obviously have friends, and I know a little bit about about AA rather. But I think what I've heard, and where I hear a lot of people struggle, is to and correct me, you'll know much better than me, but it's the belief that we're damaged and broken and powerless. I think I hear people have an issue around that. So can you talk to that a little bit, and how you approach that differently with your clients?
Yeah, that is the overall view in AA, is that it's, alcoholism is a disease. Mm-hmm. And it's something that can never be eradicated. It's something that you'll always have. You'll always be fighting it. That's why you have to keep coming to meetings. You have to keep working the steps again and again. And, it never really resonated with me. And especially after I had my experience, I actually kind of felt like I was injuring myself every time I said I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Something inside just really felt wrong. But through, my understanding of the three principles and some other philosophies too, I'm not one to really necessarily get stuck on one, because all of them hold the truth, I believe.
Yeah.
You just have to get past the layers that people created on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly believe that at our core, we are healthy, happy human beings, except that we've created this illusion innocently that we're something else.
Yeah.
And a lot of us tend to reach out for things. It doesn't have to be, drugs or alcohol. It can be shopping, gambling, sex, just being a jerk. Some people are kind of addicted to that.
Exactly.
But it's anything that kind of allows us to escape that moment that we're in. Because when we're doing those things, we don't have to pay attention to the things that we're constantly concerned about, the future and the past. And in a way, it's kind of why alcohol is called spirits. It's like a false spiritual experience, and it allows you to be more present.
Yeah.
After a few drinks, people aren't really worried about their bills or anything. They're just, you kind of forget about it. But the problem is you end up with the side effects of it. It is a depressant. So afterward, you're going to be a little down, especially if you have a hangover.
It's so funny. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I do a lot of work with, or I was diagnosed with codependency. So I actually did go to years ago. So it's hard. That's why I'm having a hard time remembering what the steps were. But I used to go to meetings for codependency. And, when you were just talking right then, it really is. It doesn't matter whether we are addicted to a substance or to another person or whatever. All we're trying to do is escape from our feelings or our thinking, which we are feeling. So it's like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's alcohol, shopping, sex, relationships, another person. It's that sort of outside in. What can I do to self-soothe?
Right.
Yeah. So
that's I mean, at the core of it really is what it comes down to, is we want to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if there's something that helps us feel better for a little bit, like, oh, look at how many likes I got on my post on Facebook. It just, does it really even matter? In a week, you're not even going to think about how many likes you got on that post. But right now, it seems to be the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And it's vital for my happiness. We find those addictions anywhere.
Exactly. And that's why, when I first came across the principles, I remember, hearing the sort of, if the classic said phrase of, if all we were not afraid of our experience, that alone would change the world. And at the time I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. But more and more I see that as, especially with addictive behavior, it's the fear of what we're experiencing that we want to rush to sort of like, soothe it, self-soothe, or get rid of it. But, what I love about the principles is that we just know that that's temporary. Whatever we're feeling is going to move through us, and we're going to return back to our natural set point. So it's the same thing under every addiction, I think. Some are just more obvious and more harmful than others. That's just what I observe.
Right.
Yeah.
And fear really, The only thing fear is actually our natural response to the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it ever is, and we create a story about what's going to happen, what might happen, instead of just being in that moment and feeling that fear and realizing it's just energy, just like anything else. I go play at open mics. I play guitar and sing, and I still, after years of doing that, feel that fear, but I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
When I step up on stage, I still get a little nervous, but I use that nervous energy as a way of performing better. And that's really kind of the key, is to look at that. It is a response to the unknown, but the fact of the matter is every moment is unknown.
I was just going to say,
we never truly know what we're going to be saying next. We never truly know unless you have some speech memorized, but even then you might say something that wasn't in there, and I've really grown to appreciate the unknown.
Yeah. It's so funny, and it is so true. I mean, when you were just sharing that, we live under this illusion that you know, oh God, I'm in the unknown right now. But like you said, it's every second is unknown. I mean, who could have ever thought this whole last year would be the way it was? Dealing with coronavirus. I mean, nobody could have anticipated that. Talk about an unknown sort of happening that we all had to adapt to. But I love also what you're saying about the nervousness and the excitement, because when I first started doing public speaking, because I was such an introvert, and I would get so nervous and my mouth would be dry and I'd have all these sensations and I'd be fighting them. I think, God, I got to get over this, and I've got to sort of, I'll be better when I get over it. And then I sort of made friends with it and just thought, oh no, this is just part of being excited. It's just part of that energy flowing through you. And we label things as good or bad. And when we stop labeling, it's just, as you said, energy moving through us.
Yeah. And a lot of that is social conditioning, things that were taught growing up by family and friends and teachers and whatnot. I mean, how many times were you told that, people who get up to speak in front of other people get really nervous? Mm-hmm. And maybe their mouth gets dry. Well, not everybody's mouth gets dry. Some people actually salivate more. So what creates, if it's really the experience of speaking in front of people that's creating it, then why is everybody's experience different?
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. So tell me a bit about the work that you do. I know you work with clients all around the world, and I know also that you do the podcast and the YouTube with Harry Dubitsky. So tell me about your work and some of the stories that of people that you've worked with. I love real life stories.
First of all, I absolutely love coaching and helping people out. And I never charge for it. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me and wants a session, please feel free to. I don't feel called to charge for it. Not against other people charging, but it's my approach is really very simple. And I honestly hardly ever, unless somebody asks, I hardly ever actually talk directly about the three principles. Mm-hmm. I talk more about thought. Like Sid said, if people just understood that thought created their reality, that would be enough. The rest of it kind of falls into place. And I really just spend that time getting to know a little bit about the person so I can come up with some kind of analogy that will resonate with them, mm-hmm. that kind of pops that bubble and says, oh, well, maybe I am okay. And that's a huge moment right there. I love when people's eyes light up, when they kind of have that moment where they're like, oh, wow, maybe I'm not broke. Mm. Maybe I don't need it to add anything or take anything away from myself in order to be happy. Maybe I could be happy right now, regardless of circumstances, regardless of whether or not that person loves me back or whatever. And there's so many stories. It's amazing.
I love what you said there before. While you're thinking of a story, That is, I woke up this morning and I got 2 emails from previous clients eager to share these sort of insights they'd had about that they weren't broken. And it was just, I mean, it brings such a, as you say, just such a smile to your face. It's just like, that is the best feeling in the world when you see somebody wake up to the fact that they're not broken and that they can be happy. It's just, it is the most fulfilling work. It doesn't matter whether we get paid or not for it. It's just is incredible.
Right. And being happy and fulfilled really has nothing to do with whether or not you're still drinking,
Mm-hmm.
or whether or not you're still overeating or still obsessed with a person or something. You can still find that peace of mind while you're letting go of the things that no longer serve you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one good example is a woman that I talked to from Sydney, Australia, a couple years back, and she was concerned that her wine drinking every night was becoming a major issue because it changed from 1 glass to 2 glasses to a bottle and a half over a number of years. And she was starting to get to the point where she felt like finishing the second bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And she was also just really concerned about, her relationship with her husband and all this other stuff. And it was, when I first started talking to her, her face was just like really tense, and you could tell she was just really fraught with anxiety and fear. And it wasn't maybe 15 or 20 minutes into our conversation. I honestly can't remember the exact words I said to her, but something really struck her, and suddenly her face just like relaxed and her eyes lit up.
Mm.
And I stopped and I said, "What was that?" And she said, "Oh, I just realized that my drinking doesn't have to be a problem."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I was just thinking about it. And on the nights when I don't worry about it, I usually only have a glass. It's the nights when I think it's a problem that I end up having too much." And in a follow up with her a couple weeks later, she said she'd gone that entire 2 weeks, some nights not even having a glass of wine, but she never had more than a glass again. And even following up months later, she was still in that same place. We had just a few sessions, but she was truly willing to look at the truth behind what she thought was a problem, which is the key. It's not getting the 3 principles, if you want to call it getting them, or understanding them. Really has nothing to do with anything intellectual. It has nothing to do with adding anything to it. You don't really have to even understand them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about being pointed in a direction of well-being, and being willing to look in that direction, and being willing to drop the story that we've created about who I am. I prefer this, I prefer not to have that. How many times have you heard people say, "Well, that's just the way I am," or "That's the way God made me," or something like that? And it's like, no, that's the way you practiced yourself into being.
Oh, I love
And you can practice yourself into being something else, just like you practiced yourself into that. And yes, at first it's difficult. It can be anyway. Some people have a quick insight and seep through it and, instantly be better. But that's not the case for most people. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with not having that instant insight, that instant psychic change. Most people are of the educational variety because we're not totally willing to let go of that story.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, when was the last time you had to think about how to tie your shoes? But when you learned how to tie your shoes, it was pretty difficult. And they'd come untied and you'd trip and fall and you'd try to tie them again and try to remember which way the rabbit went through the hole or around the whatever, whatever story you were told on how to tie your shoes. So now here we come with these 3 principles and say, it's cool that you've been tying your shoes that way, but here's this other way that doesn't really come untied. And yeah, it's going to sometimes take a minute to learn that new process of tying your shoes. And sometimes they'll come untied in the meantime. Sometimes you'll be in a hurry and you'll tie them the old way.
Yeah.
But
I
if you
love
keep
that.
practicing the new way of tying your shoes, eventually they'll never come untied and they'll always be comfortable. It's just such a beautiful way of living when we allow ourselves to go with the flow of life rather than trying to determine the flow of life.
Mm. Gosh, just listening to you, I just feel so relaxed and in such a wonderful feeling, as we say. And, as you were sharing, I love that phrase that we've practiced ourselves into. you know,
Yeah.
it's such a brilliant phrase because it's so true. But what I was also feeling as you were sharing, I was reflecting on again, and this is not bashing AA at all. I think, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of commonalities, but I think around the thing about, if you do relapse, you have to start at the beginning again. And I think that can create a lot of anxiety and a lot of shame. And because of that shame, people don't come back and get the help they need because they feel that they've failed and there's something wrong with them. So I love what you're pointing to that. So speak a little bit more about that, because I think that's such a beautiful way you describe.
Yeah, and a big part of why relapse is looked at so horribly is that there's this idea that, especially in AA with the drinking, it's like, oh, but if you go out and you have one drink, you're going to be right back to where you were, and you're going to be drunk, and you're going to be in jail or dead or whatever. So people kind of carry this mentality with them, so that if that moment comes up where they are either in a weak place and decide to, drink or use drugs to escape, or they're in a great place and the family's celebrating and toasting somebody at dinner, and they have one drink to like toast dinner. But then in the back of their mind, they've been told over and over again that if you have one, you're going to be off to the races. And they're more likely to have more because of that idea. And then if they do show up back at a meeting, they are generally shamed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have to start all over, and you have to. I mean, around here, a lot of sponsors make their sponsees reintroduce themselves for 30 days at every meeting they go to, and say, I'm new again. I'm starting again. I've got 28 days or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it just really creates this idea that first of all, we're still broken, and second of all, there's like some place we have to get to. There's some magic number. If we get the right coin, the right chip in our pocket, that somehow we'll be okay. But honestly, what I noticed in the rooms of AA, and I did check on a couple other fellowships just to see what they were about, but it seemed like the people who had the longest amount of time were actually the most miserable.
Yeah.
They had the most to prove. They felt like they had to be the wisest one in the room. They couldn't just sit there and be quiet and let the new people share. They had to try to dominate. And it hit me pretty quickly. It was like length of time has nothing to do with happiness or fulfillment in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely 100% about quality. I mean, I saw people come in and, I know initially they call it like the pink cloud that you're on when you first stop, using drugs or drinking or whatever. And, you're newly sober, you can kind of be on that pink cloud, and everything in life is great. But it's like, why not feed into that?
Yeah.
Why tell people that that's something bad? Oh, don't worry about it. It's temporary. You
Mm.
won't stay happy forever. Well, why? Why not? Why is that a problem? Why not encourage people? Like, you know what? That feeling that you have now, that's you.
Yeah.
That's your true self.
Yeah. I'm thinking about when you first shared that, your sort of profound experience, how the response was that it was too soon, it wasn't whatever, that it sounded like it was not supportive whatsoever, that you had had this profound spiritual experience where you experienced, the interconnectedness of life, and that we've all are vibration. And so it is, and then the other thing that's occurring to me is, I think often people, shame is a deeply ingrained, I mean, who wants to feel shame? If we carry shame in us, of course we want to drown that out. Of course we want to escape from it. So to add more shame onto somebody that's already using a substance to escape the original shame just seems like it's perpetuating it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like I was talking about with learning to tie your shoes again. If you go out and, you relapse, if you want to call it that, it's nothing more than you tying your shoes the old way. It doesn't mean you've forgotten how to tie them the new way. It just means you weren't thinking about it at the moment, There's nothing wrong with just getting back to tying your shoes the new way, and keep practicing it until it becomes your new habit, your new addiction.
Yeah.
It's just retraining our habitual thought patterns, retraining that subconscious mind.
Yeah. Gosh, I love this conversation with you. You just have this beautiful, gentle way of sharing it, again, in that very simple, very easily sort of understood. Yeah, it really is. It's just, interrupting that habitual thought pattern. And again, it's not a terrible thing if you as you say, tie your shoes the old way once or twice, and realize that the new way of tying them is actually a lot easier and a lot better. But it's okay. I often say that too with people I work with in codependency. They have such shame if they go back to a relationship, and I'm like, you just went and had another look. There's nothing wrong. Sometimes we need to look a few times before we go, you know what, that's not for us. But shame I see as a really, really toxic emotion for a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
Yeah.
It can also be a wonderful experience if we use it as a time to be more introspective.
That's true.
And say, why is this coming up? What is the lesson here for me? Rather than saying, oh, this doesn't feel good, so it must be bad. No, not feeling good is just your own internal guidance system telling you that you're off track.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all it is. So you can stick with the bad feeling and exacerbate it and make it stick around longer, or you can just sit down with yourself quietly and say, what is here for me to learn? Why is this coming up right now? What can I take from this to better myself?
Your cats are so gorgeous.
He gets a little jealous when I'm on here. He always wants to come say hi. This is Monkey.
That's Monkey. Oh my God, he's
Monkey.
So gorgeous. I love it. I usually have my little girl sitting next to me, but for interviews, I throw her out. She's normally hammering on the door saying, let me back in. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, again, Greg, this has been such a great talk. And I just, as I'm listening to you, I'm just like, oh my gosh, please, just everybody reach out to you, listen to your YouTube videos. And you just have such a beautiful presence about you. And I know that you help so many people. So thank you. I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show and having this chat with me.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And anybody out there who's struggling with an addiction, just realize that it's temporary.
Yeah.
Nothing in your past has ever been permanent, right? So why would this be permanent?
That's beautiful.
Just be gentle with yourself and do what you can to learn that new way of tying your shoes.
Oh, I love that. Just for people that are listening to the podcast, can you let people know, because if we're watching on YouTube, they can see how to contact you, but on the podcast, can you just say how people can reach you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Greg Suchy, Suchy. And there's also a Facebook group, Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles, and that's the same title for the YouTube channel. Wonderful. So Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles.
Okay.
And my email is on the YouTube channel, so either get a hold of me by email or through Facebook, and we'll connect.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at your cat. I can hear it purring. He is madly in love with you, I can tell. Look at that. Oh, well, thank you again.
He's an awesome soul.
Oh my
There's
gosh,
the kisses.
he's kissing you. He's a superstar. I love it. He just wanted to get on YouTube as well. All right, then. Well, thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure listening to you and speaking with you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay,
Thank you.
take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching and mentoring packages, please reach out to me at deladeyjones@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you.